Hi everyone, welcome or welcome back to my channel. I'm Em and welcome to my wrap up for September. All right, here are my stats. I have read 11 books. Technically it's 12. I haven't finished a book yet, but I'm gonna finish it by the end of the month. So I'm gonna talk about that book, even though I technically haven't finished it yet. My StoryGraph stats should be accurate because I will have an updated StoryGraph before I put those in here. But I have read 12 books, which is, a lot smaller number than I am used to reading, and I am definitely struggling with, not with how much I'm reading. I'm reading what I need to read, but I think being in bookish social media for as long as I have, and I just got used to seeing so many creators read 20 plus books a month, and for a long time I was reading 20 plus books a month, and I can't sustain that pace anymore, and that's fine because I truly believe no matter how many books you read a month, you are a reader, whether you read 2 or you read 30. And so I know I am just as valuable as a content creator reading 12 books a month as I am reading 23 books a month. I know that, but also I need to remind myself of that. So let's dive in with the book that I have not finished yet, but I'm going to finish before the end of the month, so we're going to talk about it. And that is The Song of Achilles. I did a TBR prompt card for September, and one of the prompt cards I got was to read a book based on mythology. I have had this languishing on my shelf for almost a year, so I decided it was finally time. And I will put what my final rating is on the screen right now with about 120 pages left. It feels like a 3-star, which is really disappointing because this book gets so much hype online. But if you're not familiar, this is a retelling of Achilles and Patroclus, and we're following Patroclus as our main character, and we're following him from his childhood as he grows up, befriends Achilles, they fall in love, and then are sent to the Trojan War together. And the thing that makes this only a 3-star is that Patroclus is so passive as a main character, and because it is first-person POV and we are with him all the time, having such a passive main character who just lets things happen to him and doesn't take any initiative and doesn't have any forward momentum to his life. He just lets other people decide everything for him and then goes along with that, whether that's what he wants or not. It starts as a child. There's his father is pretty ashamed of him early on, and there's an incident with another boy when Patroclus is maybe like 9, maybe a little bit older, maybe 11, where that boy is trying to take something from Patroclus, and in self-defense Patroclus pushes him over, and this other boy falls backward and he hits his head on the ground really hard and he dies instantly. And Patroclus is then, because he murdered this other boy, is sent in exile to the kingdom that Achilles is the prince of. And at no point does Patroclus try to defend himself. He never says, oh, it was self-defense, or oh, this other boy was bullying me and I was standing up for myself, or it was an accident, which it was. He did not mean for that boy to die. He just was trying to protect himself. And so that passivity, it continues throughout the whole book. All these things happen to him and to Achilles, and he never stands up for himself or stands up for Achilles. So it makes for a really boring story, if I'm being honest. Even though this is the Trojan War. This should be really interesting. This is the myth of Achilles. This should be interesting. And I'm honestly, I'm just real bored. I am really bored. And I know how this ends because I'm familiar with the myth. Obviously, I don't know exactly how Madeline Miller is going to wrap this up, but I know what the outcome is. So I don't know, based on my level of boredom and based on my knowledge of the myth, how impactful this ending will be. I have seen countless videos of people sobbing after having read this book. And I just don't think that's going to be my journey with this reading experience. So I'm pretty disappointed, truth be told. I have already read Cersei, and I really loved Cersei, so I think the bar was pretty high, but I now have two disappointing Madeline Miller reads, so I think maybe Cersei was like a one-hit wonder, and Madeline Miller probably is not the author for me. So that's my thoughts. But again, since I haven't actually finished it yet, I will put what my final star rating is on the screen. And yeah, I already suspected, but this is kind of solidified. I love Greek mythology, but I don't think I'm a Greek mythology retelling type of reader. I just don't think that's my vibe overall. Obviously, there could be exceptions, but generally, I just don't think it's for me. And then we're gonna move on to my least favorite book of the month, because I need to get this rant out of the way, and I want us to go up. I want us to go from most disappointing, most disliked, up to the most liked. I want to end on a high note, so we're gonna get this over with. For my year of Butler and Gaskell, this was a Butler month, and I picked Wild Seed, which is the first book in the Patternist series. Okay, here's the thing I didn't realize. On Fantastic Fiction, which is where I go to figure out what order to read series in, this is listed as the first book. However, it was not until I finished this book that I realized that this was published after the second book. And I've learned that this is more of a prequel to the series, and you don't need to start here. And a lot of the recommendations I saw online after the fact is that you shouldn't start here. I gave this 2 stars. And I think this is my least favorite Octavia E. Butler book. I actively hated this while I was reading it. So let's talk about it. So our main characters are Doro and Anwanwu, and they meet in like 16 something in Africa. Both of them have been alive for a really long time. Yeah, book 1 is set in 1690. Both of them have been alive for a really long time. Anwanwu just lives in a body that perpetually stays young. She's able to go into her body and to repair things when they break. If she is poisoned, her body is able to make the antidote for it. She's also able to shapeshift into animal forms and live as animals for a period of time. And she's been alive for a long time, but all the children that she has had are not gifted with the same immortality she seems to have, and she's not really sure where hers comes from. And then Doro is similar in that he has been alive for a long time, but unlike Anwanwu, he must jump to a new body when the body he is in starts to break down. So his person is the same, but the body he is in can change. And Doro is fascinated with breeding the right people together in order to get children that are more like him. And Anwanwu fascinates him because she is the only other person he's ever met who can live this long. And so he convinces her to come with him by vaguely and directly threatening her children and her grandchildren that live in this village with her. And that sets us off with these 2 characters. And Doro is the grossest character I think I've ever read. He is so manipulative. He is so arrogant. He thinks nothing about using his descendants as a breeding program and forcing people to have intercourse so that they can create a child. He forces Anwanwu to have sex with various men so that he can have those children. He forces her to have sex with him multiple times throughout the book so that they can make more babies. There is such a heavy overtone of breeding in this, and it like smacks of eugenics in a lot of places. It's so gross. And so it's hard because whatever other message Butler is going for in this book, Doro's obsession with breeding, and there's also a lot of incest in this book, and a lot of way older men having sex with really young girls. And it's just disgusting the whole way through. And I hated it. I hated every minute of it. I only finished it because it's not very long. It's not even 300 pages. And because it's part of this project. And I've already kind of bailed on the Gaskell portion of the project, and I want to stick with the Butler portion of this project. But this was a tough read. This is a heavy, heavy book. If you want to pick it up, I would check your content warnings. But I would also say if you want to try out the Pattern Is Not series, I think you can skip this. I don't know for sure. I am going to try book 2 now that I know we do not follow these characters anymore. Because if this was going to be like a series of these 2 characters, I would have noped right out of it. There is so much violence in this, and it's so different from the way, like, there's a lot of violence in all of her books, but it's just, it's on a yucky, like, lens in this one, and it was so unpleasant to read. I just wanted Onwonwoo. I liked that character a lot. I thought she was really strong. She's compassionate. She was interesting to follow. But I just wanted her to throw Doro out the fucking window. And she never did. She never did. She just let this man stalk her and harass her and intimidate her throughout the centuries. And for what? For why? I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I'll figure it out when I read the second book in the series. But this was awful. And if you're going to read Octavia Butler, I would recommend you skip this one. I don't think you need to read it. It's not a good hang. So I gave it 2 stars. And the reason it's 2 stars and not 1 star is I finished it, even though I wish I DNF'd it. And it's Butler. Like, her writing is good. It was not hard to read craft-wise. It was just hard to read subject-wise. I wish I knew what she was trying to do in this book, because I don't know that we did it at all. I would also say, in general, I have found I do not enjoy Butler's romantic relationships in her books. They always have some sort of taboo element, and it's always yucky. It always icks me out, and I don't like it. Okay, let's move on to something a little bit happier now. I don't have a copy of everything that I read, so let me double check my story graph so that I can see what I don't have a copy of, and then I can talk about that. Okay, so I'm only missing 1 book. We'll start with that so I don't forget it. I also read Wooing the Witch Queen by Stephanie Burgess. This is book 1 in the Queens of Villainy. This is a romantic fantasy, or romance fantasy, a romantasy, if you will, about Felix, who is an archduke, and he has been kind of in an abusive family situation since he was a small child, and he escapes and he goes to this other kingdom that is ruled by Queen, I forgot her name, Stasia? Something like that? Statskia? I don't know. Anyways, it's ruled by her. She is purported to be evil since she has taken the kingdom back from her villainous uncle, and Felix disguises himself as a wizard and becomes her librarian, and they fall in love. And there's some like political intrigue as well in this book, and I had a fun time with it. It's not like the best thing I've ever read, but it definitely wasn't the worst. It was fun. It was easy to read. I liked the audiobook quite a bit. And I don't think I'll continue on with this series just because it is a standard romance series where each book follows a different couple, and I did not like the character who I know is going to be the focus of book 2. Also, book 2 isn't even out yet, so maybe that's beside the point. Anyways, I gave it 3.5 stars. I thought it was a nice, silly, goofy time. I think the pacing was a little bit off, like how time passed, because a lot of time had passed, but I don't like the way the time passing was communicated. Didn't always make sense, but it was fun, and it was what I needed in the moment, so love that. Love it for that. And then I read 1 nonfiction this month. This also fulfilled my TBR prompt for the cards. I got one that was to read a book by a queer author, and I read Slayer's Every One of Us, How One Girl in All the World Showed Us How to Hold On. This is by Kristen Russo and Jenny Owen Youngs. So Russo and Owen Youngs have a podcast, or used to host a podcast called Buffering the Vampire Slayer, where it was a Buffy the Vampire Slayer recap podcast, and they started it a couple years into their marriage because it was, I forget which one. I think it was Kristen's favorite show, and Jenny had never seen it before. And so they started watching it, and then they did this podcast. And in the midst of the podcast, they divorced. And so there's 7 chapters. Each chapter is a season of Buffy, and they split who's writing the chapter, so you get like what's happening from both perspectives in this memoir, and you get what was going on in their relationship, which episodes they were recapping, what was going on with the podcast. I had zero familiarity with this podcast prior to picking up this book. I hadn't even heard of it before, but my friend Corey on Instagram, he reviewed this, and I've talked about this a lot lately, but my kids and I are watching Buffy the Vampire Slayer. It's the first time for them. I don't even know how many times for me. And this was a formative core memory TV show for me as a teenager. And so watching it again with my children has been like one of the best things of 2025. Like experiencing the show with them has been a delight, and I am really wanting to consume more Buffy content, especially more nonfiction Buffy content about other people's relationship with the show. And this was lovely. Even without knowing anything about these women or the podcast before reading it, I think it's really well written. I love how they write about the show. I love how they write about their relationship. I cried multiple times while reading this, even though I don't know anything about these women, and I just thought it was really well done, really lovely. I think if you're also a fan of a Buffy the Vampire Slayer, I would highly recommend this because it just reminded me so much of what I love about the show and what I love about the fandom for the show. And then I forgot to mention, Wooing the Witch Queen fulfilled the prompt card that I got, which was to finish a book you'd already started, and I had started Wooing the Witch Queen months ago and then put it down. So that was for that prompt card. I don't know if I'm going to be able to remember the rest of them. Oh, I think I will. Okay. So the next 2 books we're going to talk about is I finished the Fallen Gods series by Hannah Kaner. I read Sunbringer and Faithbreaker, and I have a video where I read the whole trilogy if you want to check it out. If you're interested on whether or not you wanted to read this series, I tried to keep it as spoiler-free as possible, and I think I did a pretty good job. But this is a series. It starts with God Killer, and it's about this woman named Kissin, whose family was killed due to the gods, and so she is now a god killer, and she goes around and destroys shrines so that the gods are weakened if they have nobody to worship them. And in the rest of the series, we are building up to this war between a king and gods. And I love this fantasy series. I think this is so well done. I don't think it gets nearly as much love as it should get. I think the characters are wonderful, and the way the relationships are built are so well done. I think these books are deceptively slim. They are much chunkier than they look, in my opinion. There's so much in here. I gave Sunbringer, I think I gave 4.5 stars. And Faithbreaker, I don't think I gave it a full 5 stars. God Killer is a 5-star book for me, but yeah, Faithbreaker I gave a 4.5. So I still really, really enjoyed it. There's this thing that happens in fantasy books, especially if it's a found family, which this series definitely is, where in book 1, our found family, they meet each other, they're together a lot, and you really grow to love their dynamic as a group. And then in book 2, this is not the only series that does this, they are scattered to the winds for all for very valid different reasons. And I hate it. I hate it when my found family is torn apart and they have to go be separate from each other. And that's what had to happen in these 2 books. So my found family was never back together again, which is why it's not a full 5 stars. Because even though this was a reread, this I hadn't read before. So even though I knew they weren't going to be together anymore, I was still mad that they weren't together anymore, and it made me sad. But I still really love this series. I'm really excited to see what Hannah Kaner does next. If you want way more detail about these books, I would recommend watching that video because I just talk about them nonstop for a really long time. And then I did another project this month. I started this series called TBR Unholathon, where I spend maybe 5 days reading through or DNFing 5 books off of my Libro FM TBR, and it went great. The first round went great. I have been pumping the brakes because I want to start October's so bad, but it's not October yet, so I gotta wait. But it was fantastic. I finished 3 of the 5 books. Let's start with the one I liked the least, and another 2-star, which is The Vaster Wilds by Lauren Groff. This is historical literary fiction, and it's about this girl who is wandering through the North American wilderness in like pre-colonial times, and she's just suffering for 200 pages. That's it. That's all that happens. So if you just want to watch someone suffer endlessly, if you like sadness and misery in your books, pick it up. It might be right up your alley. It was not up my alley at all. So yeah, pretty disappointed about that. Also, my first Lauren Groff, and if I'm going to be honest, I just think I expected more from the writing with this one, and it just wasn't there for me. She did some things that were kind of annoying, like annoyingly repetitive in ways that didn't make a lot of sense. And I don't know. I think when I know that an author has won a lot of awards, maybe my expectations are just too high for writing quality. But also not perfect in my writing taste. I know that I love a lot of authors who other people think are poor writers. So take my opinion with the necessary grain of salt. A book I did enjoy, much more than I thought I would, is The City in Glass by Nevo. Now, I love Nevo a lot, but I haven't heard really great reviews for this one, and my husband actually had already read it and told me he didn't think I would like it very much. So I tried to have low expectations going into it, and I think that set me up for success. But we're following this demon who is basically the caretaker of this city, and there's an angel character as well, but I would say that the relationship, the romance of you, if you will, in this book is really between this demon and the city that she protects. But we're following this demon and this angel throughout the centuries as they fight and over the city and protect this city and fight with each other. And it's a lot slower paced than a lot of her other books, much more character driven. But I think Nevo's writing is stunning, and I read this in one day. I really liked it. I gave it 4 stars. And I only have 1 book left, and then I will have read all of Nevo's backlist, which I'm really excited about. And then the surprise from this vlog was After the Forest by Kel Woods. This is a fairy tale expansion. I wouldn't say it's a retelling. And but you know how I feel about fairy tale retellings. They are a lot of the time more of a miss than a hit for me. But this one we're following Hans? Is that his name? Yeah, Hans and Greta, Hansel and Gretel, a decade after the events of their fairy tale and what that looks like. And I love that this is more historical fiction with magic thrown in. That's my favorite type of fantasy. And so it really felt rooted in a real place because of the historical setting. And I really loved Greta. I liked how fairy tales were woven into the story, but it wasn't a fairy tale retelling. I find fairy tale retellings to get kind of boring and repetitive because, especially if they're following the fairy tale beat for beat, but since this is exploring what could happen to a fairy tale character after their fairy tale is over, I find that endlessly fascinating. I love the writing for this. The audiobook was really well done, and I'm really excited to read more by Kel Woods. I think I gave this 4 stars, 4.25 stars. I had a great time. Highly recommend if you also like a fairy tale-y kind of vibe in your books. And then one of the other TBR prompt cards I got for this month was to read a science fiction, and I read, finally, When the Moon Hits Your Eye by John Scalzi. This was sent to me by the publisher back in March, and I finally got to it. And this is the most whimsical, ridiculous premise. The premise for this is, what if the moon was made of cheese? What if one day the moon just turned to cheese? What would that look like? Scientifically, what would happen? We don't have a main character in this book, which I think is a really interesting choice. Instead, we're following a bunch of different people. Sometimes you will circle back to a same character, or you'll be in the same place as a previous character, but the lens will have shifted ever so slightly. And I loved the expansive scope of having all these different people to go and follow and to check in with, and not having just one person guiding us through the story. I think it made it really interesting. It started off so fun, and then it did get stressful because I think John Scalzi does a really good job of accurately predicting how United States specifically would react if the moon suddenly became cheese. Though this president in this book is a lot more even keel than our current president. So, you know, the book has that going for it. But yeah, this was really fun. I think this is definitely my favorite of the John Scalzi standalone novels. Like if this one and Kaiju Preservation Society and Starter Villain, like if you consider all those standalones and their own little trilogy, I think this is definitely my favorite. I gave it 5 stars. I had such a good time reading this book. It was so fun to read. I had a hard time putting it down, and I just constantly wanted to be back to find out what was going to happen next, which is really all I am asking for when I read a book. All right, and then I continued on in, I don't know what this series is called, the Warden series with Necrobane by Daniel M. Ford. Book 1 is called The Warden, and our main character in this is Alice, and she is a necromancer. And in book 1, she has just graduated from necromancy college, and when people graduate from necromancy college, they are assigned to be a warden in a city or a village to protect and care for this village. And she is assigned to this backwoods, super small, super isolated village, and she is pissed. She thinks she is being snubbed, and she has a big old chip on her shoulder. She's pretty snobby, and she gets to this village, and she has to win over the villagers. And there's a lot of character growth in book 1, and we watch Alice like come off her high horse a little bit, learn how to like have compassion for people who are different from her. I loved book 1. I did not love book 2 in the same way. For this book only being 300 pages, it's not even 300 pages. It's only over 300 pages because there's a snippet from book 3 in the back. So it's not, the story itself is not even 300 pages. And it is so slow. Even though there is all this action happening, it is so slow. It took me 5 days to read this book. Because the pacing was so slow, then I would get bored and I would put it down and go do something else, or I'd just find anything else to do other than that. But we're continuing on. Well, at the beginning, we're continuing on what happened at the end of The Warden. Alice wakes something up and needs to go back to her village and figure out how to protect them. And we started with that, and that had a lot of forward momentum. And then it felt like Ford lost his plot. And so was then stumbling around trying to figure out what the next forward momentum was going to be for this book. And we had to stumble around with him, which is not fun, not my ideal situation. The highlight of this book for me is Alice's friendship with Tun. That is my favorite. I love their dynamic. I love their relationship. I love how they interact with each other. It just made me endlessly happy every time they are on page together, and fortunately they are on page together a lot, which was really, really nice. I am going to finish this out. I do have one more book left. I'm hoping I like it more than this, and that just one just had painful middle book syndrome, and the next one will be a 5-star again. Fingers crossed. And the last book we're going to talk about, this was also fulfilled a prompt card, but honestly, I can't remember what the prompt card is now. But I read Calabasas by R.F. Kuang, and I gave it 4.5 stars. This is about Alice and, what's his name? Peter, who are rival postgraduate students at Oxford or Cambridge? Cambridge. And their faculty advisor dies, and they journey into hell to get him back. And this was so much more accessible than I thought it was going to be. I was worried the writing was going to be a little bit more dense and esoteric in a way, but it wasn't. It was really approachable. It was really engaging. I think Alice, our main character, she is really funny in the beginning of this book, just in her like observations and the dry offhand comments that she made throughout the book. I found her utterly delightful, and I really liked the journey into hell. We start off right away, so there's no like setup or like preparing to go into hell. No, you start the book and they are going. It is time. And I feel like the pace for this was really good, and it's a 500-page book, and I read this in 2 days, 3 days. I loved it. It was so good. Audiobook is also excellent. And it's only not a 5 for me because there were some things at the end that I didn't love. And because I'm such an endings reader, when the ending is not my favorite, it does diminish my overall enjoyment of the book a little bit. I hate that about myself. I wish I could remember the good feelings more than the negative feelings, but I feel like that's also a very human trait. But I absolutely love this. I adore R.F. Kuang's writing. I need to read more of her backlist because I've given both of the books I've read by her very high ratings, and I'm hoping that is a trend that will continue throughout the rest of her books. But yeah, this was great. I love that I read it because I wasn't planning on it, and I loved that I loved it. I think this is a good time. So if you've been putting it off because you are worried it's going to be too inaccessible, just start it because I think you'll really like it. If you're an R.F. Kuang person. Really, she's not for everybody. All right, so that is it. That is all the things that I read in September. If you would like to leave me a comment, I would love to know what you read in September, what your favorite book was, what your least favorite book was. If you have any thoughts about the books I've read, tell me all the things. And if you just want to leave an emoji to let me know that you're here, leave me a bear emoji because Fat Bear Week just ended, and if you've been following me on Instagram, you know Fat Bear Week has been my whole personality, and I'm going to be really sad when all the bear content is over. And otherwise, like if you liked it, subscribe if you want to, and I'll talk to y'all in the next one. Bye!